Welcome to episode 4 of the Dignity in Education season of the Dignity Negotiation. Education is often judged by what it delivers: knowledge, skills, outcomes. But far less attention is given to what it conditions. Today's conversation stays with that layer. Joining me to unpack this architecture is Manish Jain, an educationist and co-founder of Swaraj University and Dismantle. Manish, welcome to the room.
Hello, Phils. Good to see you. Thank you for having me today.
Great. Looking back at your own early time inside the classroom, Manish, what was the very first lesson you learned about what the system actually demanded of you?
I actually was born in India, but when I was a small child, I was taken to the U.S. I like to tell people I was kidnapped by the American dream. When I was, so I went to a government school in the U.S. And I think, my first lesson of going to school was around a fear of making mistakes. So I remember when I was a child, I was so afraid, and maybe the fear of making mistakes was also connected to fear of being different, of standing out because I was a brown man in basically all white classroom. And so I remember going to the teacher like every time when I was young and saying, "Is this correct, ma'am? Is this correct, ma'am? Is this ma'am?" So looking for the approval of the system and make sure that I didn't make any mistakes so I wouldn't get punished in the class. I saw other kids getting punished with, being failed or being humiliated or being put in detention. So I was very afraid of that initially. And then I think what happened with that is it transitioned into almost an addiction for being praised. So the fear was not making mistake. The fear became I wouldn't be praised. I wouldn't be told I'm a good boy, a good student, I'm worthy. And that was then, how the system, in terms of rewards, I wouldn't get the gold star and get to go to the pizza party. That was the reward. The fear was that, that in some way I would be left behind. I slowly got myself pulled, there's a race, the race to be at the top. And that fear then became, the fear of being left behind. And if I'm left behind, then I'm nobody. I don't have any value, any worth. So I think those were some of my earlier memories and struggles in school. And one of the things that I think I realized in that was um, what very deep thing that happened was this looking to an authority, institutional authority for validation. Like that I am worthy, that I'm good. And the lucky thing that happened for me, which was something that happened outside of school. Um, so my family couldn't, both of my parents worked, so I could not go for any kind of organized sports like basketball or baseball there. So we used to organize things in the neighborhood, just amongst my friends. So a lot of places you would have seen neighborhood kids organizing things. And I realized that's fundamentally different than having an organized sport. And the difference is around the referee. Is around a referee, like so in the organized sports you have an official referee. He'll say you're right, you're wrong, who's in, who's out, whatnot, who committed a foul, and then you have to just accept it because they're the authority. But in the sports of kids on the street, in the parks, it's the rule. There's no referee. We're self-refereeing ourselves. So everyone is encouraged that we have to make. We don't need to look to an external authority for the answer or for approval or for telling us we're right or wrong. We can do it amongst ourselves. We self-regulate. We learn to self-regulate. Oh, I committed a foul. Yes, I committed a foul. If you start arguing too much, then the game is over. So you're like, yes, I did this. And so there's a very different culture that builds up around that. So I noticed the difference between those. In the school, I was always dependent on the authority to say you're right, you're wrong, you're good, you're bad. But in my neighborhood, we were able to kind of self organize and self regulate ourselves, and we didn't need an authority to tell us what to do.
Actually, if you don't just go to school to learn, what is actually the school training the students to become?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. The school actually trains students, or well, actually three things. One is what I said. One is to be dependent on an external authority. So it's interesting. Gandhi, in 1909, he wrote a book called Hind Swaraj, and he was talking about the real purpose of the freedom struggle. And he called this kind of modern Western system, he called it Shaitani system, satanic system. So I was quite surprised when I read that. I'm like, that's pretty heavy. Why did he say that? So as I researched in, I started to understand any system that tries to cut our connection to our own inner voice, our own sense of dignity, our own inner conscience, our own sense of right and wrong, that voice which talks it and replaces with an institutional authority, that he was referring to as a satanic system. So I think that one thing is that school is not allowing us to develop our own, like for example, we don't when we do an assignment, we're not asked to self grade or self assess ourselves. We don't ever learn that part that we can assess our own work. Um, I'll tell you a beautiful story around that, which I learned in India of how the power of that. But the second thing school which is related, it teaches us to hate ourselves, and I say this very strongly, we hate ourselves, and this is very much needed for a consumer global economy, which people don't feel good about themselves. If people are not feeling, if the learner does not feel good about themselves, they're looking for, again, validation from outside. When we're told all the time, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not beautiful enough, you are as you are, um, you're too dark, you're too light, you're too fat, you're too thin, all of these things that somehow come in the culture, and we're not able to say that I am good as I am, as I am, I'm good enough, I'm enough, I'm a whole human being. So I think that's the second thing that culture feeds in. Like all the time we're being, this external criticism is set up through the system of rewards and punishments, but also we are colonized with an inner critic, and an inner critic who is always looking for perfection, who's always saying, oh, you're not good enough, you can't do this well. And it's very difficult, like having those people who are particularly, become achievers, high achievers. There, I've noticed this inner critic is so strong, never a sense of self-satisfaction, self-happiness. So I think that's the second part. And the third I would say is that the system makes us totally dependent on money. So this is the other fear, that we cannot survive. We cannot survive because we don't know how to grow our own food. We never learn how to build our own house. We never learn how to properly make clothes. We never know how to build community. We're always told you have to compete against each other. So this idea that the basic things I need to survive, I'm never allowed to learn. All of our ancestors, my village grandmother knew how to do all those things. I find her to be so self-confident, self-aware, and connected to things. So this sense of like being totally dependent on the system because we don't know how to make or grow anything or produce anything, that means we need to get money all the time. And so that creates a lot of fear, is like, where am I going to get this money? How am I going to get this money? And if I don't get this money, then I'm nobody again. Nobody will respect me. Nobody will love me. I won't get a good wife. My children won't love me. All of those things were being, it's all connected, right? Because the story of the schooling system is, and I'll never be happy. The story of the schooling system is you have to study hard, then you'll get good grades, then you'll get into a good university, then you'll get a good job, then you'll have a lot of money, then you can buy a lot of fancy things, then your wife will love you, then you'll get happiness. So that whole fear, if you don't get that then the whole thing falls apart, right? Who are you? You're nobody. You don't exist. You don't have any value. So I think these were some of the things that school is there to make us totally dependent on a system where then we don't think we have any other choice except to comply and be obedient to that system.
Manish, when you see this pressure from the family and the school regarding the future jobs, dependency on money, and even marriage, objectively, what those warnings misguided? Or is the architecture of our economy specifically designed to punish those who refuse to align?
Yeah, I think it's designed to punish people both because alignment calls for people to disconnect. Alignment to the system means you disconnect from your local place, from your own local community, your local relationships. Because to grow in the system, you have to be mobile. You have to go wherever the highest dollar gets paid. You have to go there. Your loyalty is to the job, to the master, to the man. That's the loyalty to the system, not to your place, because your place will say, live simply, live happily, be connected. And oftentimes, I've seen in a lot of communities now, people are. I just had a conversation yesterday. One, while we were talking about why young people are selling their family land. Then I asked them, "Is that your land?" And they said, "Yes, that's our land." I said, "No, no, no, it's not your land. The land belongs to your ancestors. The land is part of your family. It's part of who you are. It's not just a commodity." But in the modern education system, land, our mountains, our rivers, our soils, our forests, all of it becomes commodities to sell in the market. And so if you have a connection to those things, right? If you have a connection, then you would protect them, those other beings, right? You would protect those other beings because they're part of you, right? If you ask my grandmother, she never went to school. She didn't know reading and writing. For many years of my life, I was misguided. I thought she was uneducated. I thought, oh, I am the brilliant Harvard educated boy, and my grandmother is stupid and ignorant and illiterate. This was the narrative, the global narrative. And I realized that, she is so deeply rooted and grounded and intelligent in ways that I can never be intelligent. And when I asked her, if you ask me, what is your idea of who you are or who your family is? So my idea of who I am is it's my family, my parents, and my sister and me, four people, right? Um, and if you ask my grandmother, it'll be at least 300 people, plus our animals, the cows, the goats, uh, plus the mountain, plus the river. This is all family. So this is what radically shifts our sense of place. And why is that important? Is because that the global system needs continuous fuel. So if people started saying no to, we're not going to sell our sacred mountain, which has all the minerals, we're not going to sell our forests, we're not going to sell our rivers to Coca-Cola or, Bisleri water, um, then there's a big problem, right? The companies, how are they going to get all of this stuff? The government, how is it going to get it? So part of the education role is to disconnect us from place. And I think it's very critical because if we grow up in an education that connects us to place, we'll never sell our sacred Mother Earth, right? And I know communities around the world, they will never sell their Mother Earth. They are less schooled and they have deep, profound respect for the place, for the ancestors, for all the living beings there, and they would never sell because it's not theirs to sell. Nothing is ours to sell.
Well, let's return to the classroom again. What is the cost of speaking something wrong in the classroom?
The cost of speaking something wrong is humiliation, basically. People laughing at you, people not feeling a sense of belonging, people telling you you're not intelligent, you'll never have a future. So this is, I think, the thing that happens to the students is that they start to pretend. They start to pretend. And I, in my own life, there's a lot of things I've met, people, we get very good at pretending, at faking, at giving the right answer, even if we really don't know or we don't really deeply understand. But you can memorize the answer, you can give it. And inside, the feeling is always, oh, someday somebody might catch me. I'm talking about this like an expert, but actually I don't really know because I don't have real experiences. What I think the classroom does is it does not encourage us to experience the world. So I might read a bunch of books, let's say, about organic farming. But because I've never worked on a farm, I don't know about how to do it. I don't know. I don't, I've never seen how to regenerate the soil or how to deal with the pests. I can give a nice talk from what I've read, but if somebody asks me some deep questions, I'll be exposed as a fraud. No. And I think most of what we learn, whether it's math questions, okay, we memorize the formula, we're just repeating it. Do we really know deeply what it means? I never knew. I don't think most people know. And so there's a deep sense of, and when I was in university and in my postgraduate work, I always felt, like somehow I'm a fraud. I'm a fake. If I know inside, how did I do? I just memorized something and gave the test, or took something, read a book, repeated it in the paper. But do I really know any of these things? I never really had any confidence in it. And I think most of us, if we're honest, we don't really know much because unless we've experienced it, it's hard to really know. There's a very famous saying, don't confuse the maps for the terrain. So we learn the maps, the terrain, the land, the ground, the context, the dynamic energies, forces, different actors, different stories, different relations. We don't know. We don't know. We only know a map, like this is the framework that we learned, and we can, go to a meeting and we can reproduce that framework and say this is how the world works, but we don't really know. And the interesting thing was when I was at UNESCO in Paris. I worked there for 2 years. And I met global experts all over the world from the UN system and from top universities. And they gave brilliant speeches. But time after time, every evening, you give them two whiskeys. And then you talk to them, and they're like, we don't really know. We don't know what to do. We can give you a good lecture about it. We don't know how to do anything in the ground, in a community, in a place. We don't really know how to do it. So I think that sense of really, you know, and the best students are good at faking it. That's what I'm saying. The best students are faking it. So I kept doing it, and I faked it all the way to Harvard, to the UN, to so many places. But inside, I was not satisfied. So that's why I decided to say, hey, I need to go and how to learn how to grow food. I need to know how to build a house. I need to have confidence to, build a community up together. How can I do these things? And I want my daughter to do that also. So I have a 24-year-old daughter. She's never gone to school. She's never looked in an exam book, never sat in a classroom, never looked at a textbook or an exam. None of those things. She's been free learning with different people, real experiential things. So I believe very deeply in this idea. I give you an idea about experiential learning and not knowing. So I ask people, if you've ever had a broken heart, Have you ever had a broken heart, Phils?
So many times.
Yes. So you can read 1,000 books, but unless you have that broken heart, you never can know that feeling. So there's so many things in life that we have to experience. And the problem with schooling, it tells us, it tries to shortcut the experience. It tries to tell you, don't worry about going into the world and experiencing it. Just sit here, read a textbook, 1 page about it, give it on the exam, and now you understand. And I think that creates a lot of problem. And today it's even creating more problem because um, young people are lacking a resilience. You know, when they face tough challenges in life, they collapse, they go into depression, they're not able to handle it. And so, unless we keep, you know, it's like learning is like a muscle. Unless we keep using that experiential learning muscle, we won't build our confidence. We won't know how to deal with difficult situations in life. We won't know how to go deeper into understanding things. So, I think, you know, we won't be able to access our own wisdom, you know, unless we experience different things in the world. And so I think schooling locks us up in a box. Says sit in this box for 8 hours a day and pretend like you know something, which which is not how we which is not the way um, you can actually really understand life or the world.
Well, you mentioned your experience at the Harvard or the UN. Most students operate under the assumption that if they play the game to reach those top institutions, they will eventually earn the power to challenge the system. What does your own decision to refuse to bow down or accepting those future hours uh, reveal about the reality of the promised freedom?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. You know, it's that's the myth that everyone goes, "Oh, I can go and challenge and I can change the system." But my experience is that people become totally part of the system. They become dependent on system that has many dimensions. One is starting from a very crude idea of a loan. Once you take a loan, those places are very expensive. You take a loan to go there, you have to then, I've seen so many people saying we're doing that, and then they're at the end of their 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, they're like, oh no, I'm not going to challenge this. I have to go and get a high paying job so I can repay the loan. So the loan and the financial element is one part that makes people into almost bonded labor. I had one friend, she was even 20 years later still trying to pay her loan from graduate school. So um, that's part of it. And I think the other thing is then you get attached. What it the system does is it, you know, you bought a brand. You bought a brand. So for the brand to have value, you have to defend the brand. The brand becomes the most important thing. If I start to say question Harvard, then the brand people are going to be like, your brand doesn't have any value, which means you personally don't have any value then, right? You spent all these years. And so it was very difficult for me too initially to start questioning it because I don't see too many of my friends doing it who graduated from there. They get caught because emotionally you're so engulfed and entangled in that brand and that hierarchy. There's a knowledge hierarchy, right, that gets created. The people at the top of those universities are told you're the most brilliant, you should make all the decisions for the world. And here I am saying, no, people like my grandmother or people, indigenous peoples living in their communities, they're intelligent, they're brilliant. They should be making decisions about their lives. Why are we making decisions for them? So that is very difficult. So people get so um, yeah, I would say attached to that they can't really challenge, or if their challenges are very safe challenges. Nothing really that's going to rock the knowledge hierarchy or shake up the game in any significant way. There's a bunch of few friends who like to be cool and say, oh, we're challenging this, but it's still within the existing framework and system. That doesn't get challenged. It's just like, oh, why did you go left? You could have gone right. Oh, you could have done this, or you could have, we could implement better. We can do this. Those kinds of challenges, not to question the fundamental, I would say, um, direction or the fundamental definition of the game. So I give you, when I say definition, we were given all over the global south, we were given certain definitions. This is the definition of success. This is the definition of development. This is the definition of economic growth. This is the definition of happiness. And this is basically this is the definition of equality. And then you have a whole bunch of indicators that have been created around the world to try to fit that. And most of those definitions mean copying the Western modernist discourse, framework, systems, institutions, technologies, all of that. So there's no space to even question the definition that's given. That you have to take for granted. You're not allowed to go outside of that. In with the case of happiness, it's very interesting. A few years ago, if you know Bhutan, this tiny country, 700,000 people, started to question the global definition of happiness, which was basically, consume, consume, consume like the Americans, and you'll be happy. And they told America, look, you have all the money, you have all the technology, you have all the armies, but are your people happy? No, they're the most depressed, most violent, most unhealthy people. So where's your happiness in this society? Why should we copy you? So I don't think people, when they go to Harvard or any of these, Oxford or any of these institutions, they're really taught to question the game. The game, the definition, the direction is the same. And you can go a little bit here or there, but not fundamentally question it. There's no space to that. Because if you do that, then you have to question the institution itself. And people aren't willing to do that because they put so much money into it, so much time into it. So um, it's difficult for people to do that, and plus their credibility. So unless you go outside, like I spent the last 28 years trying to build a different credibility that is not dependent on Harvard. It's my credibility that being in communities, knowing how to build things, know how to make things, knowing how to mentor people, supporting alternative systems, this is the credibility. Nothing of that has to do with Harvard. It actually came in spite of Harvard that we can create these kinds of other alternatives, other kind of notions of economy, other notions of development, other notions of the good life, of happiness. So it comes from other places, not these institutions. But um, one has to build a different base of credibility, which is then grounded in experience, real world experience. So that takes time to rebuild that credibility. No, that why would people want to listen to you if you don't have experience then? So that we have to build up. And that's what I encourage young people. Take time. The institutions are not don't have the answers. Going and being with people, finding the local masters, those are the people. Many of them don't have degrees. They don't have any kind of, they're not high profile. They're not in the media, but they are deep, deep souls. They have deep knowledge. Find those people, apprentice with them, learn with them. Then you'll get something real. Otherwise, this whole system is all fake. Everything is, it's like, the American dream. It's like a glossy box which is empty inside. And I think more and more people around the world are starting to understand how empty that system is. So
Yeah.
the school system told us that's the ultimate. The American dream is the ultimate success story of life. And I think that's where we have to start challenging that narrative. That's important.
Who is the loser and who gains from this fear-based system?
Well, the biggest loser is the rest of nature because that's being destroyed. If you look all over the world, our ecosystems, our biodiversity, our different biospecies, they're all being lost because of this system. You know, it's interesting. We don't even know the amount of diversity that we had. Our schooled mind cannot comprehend it. Um, one friend of mine who's involved in rice farming and rice seeds, he told me that at one point in India, 100 years ago, we had more than 114,000 different varieties of rice, just rice, right? And now most average schooled person knows maximum 3 or 4 or 5 varieties. But there were 114,000 plus varieties of rice. So the diversity of seed, and now today in India, there's less than 7,000 varieties left. So we've lost a whole bunch of knowledge, a whole bunch of diversity of seeds um, in this process. And it's across all kinds of different kinds of plants and species that this is happening. So that's one. The second thing that happens is um, one of the things that really shook my world was that I when I was working with the UN, there was a report which came out and the studies that came out that every year global international development something like $140 billion goes from the global north to the south in international aid. So that's not so shocking. What's shocking is at the same time, 1.3 trillion goes from the south to the north. So they said they're coming to develop us, to educate us, to civilize us. But the colonial model is very much in place, and they are extracting all of our resources, putting into massive debt, taking free tax breaks, all kinds of things too. And so it's actually disgusting. It's sickening to know that this model is there. It's destroying our own confidence, and we're trapped in this model. Our people are trapped in this global development model. We don't know how to get out of it. They keep telling us we're the experts. We're sending the McKinsey people. We're sending the Harvard people. We're gonna tell you how to solve your problems. And they're putting us deeper and deeper and deeper into the problem, deeper into debt, deeper into a colonial model, new colonial model that we can't even see or comprehend.
Well, does fear always need authority? At what point does it begin to become internalized?
Yeah, I think it gets internalized, as you said. I said earlier in our schooling that fear has many dimensions, but a lot of it gets internalized when we lose our own self of self worth. We're not able to assess ourselves. We're not able to listen to feedback. We're not able to give feedback deeply. We're not able to, you know, pause and go deeper into understanding different things that are happening around us because there's pressure to keep going, next assignment, next syllabus, complete the syllabus. All of those things happen, and that happens. I was going to tell you a story of one of my gurus. He was a Gandhian. He was a educationist, Gandhian educationist. So he told me the story about his father. His father was a goldsmith, and he made the king. Local king called him. This is more than 120 years ago. The local king called him and showed him a necklace, and he said, "Hey, can you make this necklace for me?" So the goldsmith made the necklace, gave it to him. The king was so happy. Every time the king saw him, he'd say, "Oh, you're so great. You're so talented. You're wonderful." One day, that goldsmith says to the king, can you bring the necklace? I want to see it." And the king brings the necklace, and the goldsmith takes out a hammer, smashes the whole necklace into pieces. The king says, "Oh, you've gone mad. What happened to you? You're crazy. What are you doing?" And he says, "You know, when I made that necklace and I gave it to you, I knew it wasn't my best quality. It wasn't my best work. And every time you praise me, I pinches me because I don't report to you as a king. Whenever I make something, it's for my God. It's for my God, and I am responsible to my God to make the best quality things. It's my service to my God. It's my love of my God. And whenever you pinch me, it says, "Oh, you didn't make your best." So I'm going to redo this whole necklace for you. So that person, he had such a deep sense of alignment, such a deep sense of commitment to excellence, such a some deep sense of beauty, of honesty, of integrity. And I feel that that gets destroyed by the system, that we're only looking to the outside. And when that authority doesn't have to be there anymore, because that own voice in us says that you're not good enough, you can't be happy with whatever you've done. Look, the neighbor's child is growing more. This comparison that puts in, even with my own daughter, this was the toughest thing for me to unlearn because she's doing beautiful things. But then, my mother calls me, says, "Oh, your friend's daughter has done this achievement or done this and does this." And then that voice goes off in my head, "Oh, what are you doing? Your daughter's not good enough. You're not good enough." All of this kind of thing starts to happen. So this continuous internalization, when we start entering into this vicious web of comparison and competition. And I think that's something that is very deeply ingrained in the school. And supposedly in with the best schools and best universities, it's even deeper. It runs very deep. It's vicious. It's vicious. You can never be happy if that voice is going on all the time in your head. And I know many friends that voice is like, does not let them be happy with anything in life because there's always somebody else achieving more, always somebody else uh, getting more famous, already somebody else making more money. It's always a continuous competition and race. So I think that's when the internalization happens, and
Well, education does not just raise students, it raises future leaders, it raises future politicians, it raises future voters, it raises future employers and employees. How does this show up later in workplace and leadership and those systems outside academia?
yeah. So one thing you didn't say, it raises good human beings. Future good
Yes.
human beings, Phil. Everything else, those are all roles that serve in the system. But good human beings, people who are able to live outside of the system, it doesn't give you that power. And I think something Gandhi had said was, in his model of education, he wanted people to have their own local economies because that gives them independence and confidence that they don't if even if they speak against the system, they're not dependent on the system, their jobs don't depend on it, their livelihood does not depend on it, their survival does not depend on, because they have their own independent things. So I think that was his model of why learners should be able to, in what he called Netalim, was that people should have basic skills for survival. And I think some of these things we teach, I remember in my school, they had a class on woodworking, for example. This was way, way back. This was like, let's say almost 45 years back. We had a class on woodworking, we had a class on sewing, but it was just the basic thing. It wasn't like anything you could feel confident about, like I'm a good at this, I'm good, I can use this skill, I can survive with this skill. No, it was like, okay, here's how you do a little bit, you make some ugly stupid thing and you submit it for the homework, and you're like, oh, I did that, but this doesn't give you any confidence like this is something I'm good at. To be good at something, you have to keep practicing, and there's no time in school to practice anything. That's the problem. You can't practice anything, even a subject. Even if you like a subject, let's say you love a subject, you get one period a day. That's it. You can't go deep. So you can't tell the teacher, hey, I love this history lesson. I want to go deeper and explore more and try to understand all of the things that happen there. And No. There's no time for that. You have 45-minute period. That's it. Then you do the next subject. Then you get all your homework and you go and finish your homework and you do your tuition and then you come back the next day. But to go deeper into things, to practice, to build that confidence, it doesn't happen really in the school usually.
If this fear is removed from learning environment, what changes first?
Well, let's see. There's basically, as I said, the fear. A lot of it is around. Well, one has to understand there's a whole hidden curriculum, right? So the fear has many labels. It's a system of rewards and punishments, and having institutional authority in place. It's a system of that keeps you locked up in a building all day and away from the rest of nature, away from your place. It's a system that makes you compete against friends. So you can never really trust anybody deeply or fully because they're always a competitor to you. So if you remove those things, what the thing which I talk about or I'm most interested in is something called your intrinsic motivation, your the deepest motivation, why you do things, why you care about things, um, what you long for, what your connection, your desire for belonging. Um, all of those things take shape then, so the intrinsic motivation is never recognized in school because nobody ever asks the child, what do you care about? What's happening in your life, in your community, in your family, in your ecosystem? What are those things that matter to you and make a difference to other people's lives around you? Nobody ever asks the child that. So if you started asking that, then you would have to not only ask that, you would have to give time for that. Because it's like, somebody says, hey, Phils, what do you care about? And you tell them your whole thing, and then they're like, well, we don't have time for that. Sorry, Phils. Then you feel like even worse, you're like, well, I told you everything, all my life dreams, all my motivation, all the problems in my and then you're telling me you don't even have time to do it, then what's the point of telling you? So I think a lot of people, small children, you can see their intrinsic motivation, their curiosity and action. They're always trying to figure out things. But as they sit in the class, that fear, that sense of hopelessness, that sets in for a lot of kids. Like it's interesting. I'll tell you a story of another friend. He was running a school, so he said there's a box, children put their questions in the box. So I said to him, hey, Tushar, that's a good idea, but all the children are writing fake questions. He's like shocked. What do you mean fake questions? I said, see, the questions are only related to your syllabus. Like, how do I solve this math problem? Or what is this history question? And all of that. And he's like, yeah, how did you know that? I'm like, that's what children feel they can ask. That's not their real questions. The real question is, why is my river dried up? Why is my cousin in depression and almost committed suicide? Why does my relative have cancer? Or why are neighbors fighting all the time? Um, why is the company coming up and grabbing all everyone's land up and people are having to get displaced from here? There's so many different real questions that are happening in our lives. Never any time, no interest in school, never any time to talk about it. So I think without that, there's no space for the inner motivation to grow because those are the things you care about. You care about your cousin, you care about your neighbors, you care about your land, you care about your you know parents, your animals, all of those things you care about, and then nobody gives you any space in the school to talk about or share that or do anything about that. So I think yeah, it could be very different. We've tried to organize other spaces, but then the curriculum starts from all the things that are happening around us in our lives. That's where you can start to build a different curriculum. That's how you get away from the fear, because then your experience matters. Right now, we're being told over and over again by the school, our experience doesn't matter. What matters is how much you can memorize and give on the exam, not how much experience in life you're getting. So when we start valuing our own experiences, we get a different kind of confidence in life. So I think that's an important thing, is how those things rebuild our confidence. That's what we should be talking, because the fear is there, it kills our confidence.
In your experience, where have you seen students begin to act differently when that pressure is absent?
Yeah, I think there's interesting, when the pressure is absent, a lot of students don't want to do anything in experience, because there's a period of detox. They're so just happy to be able to breathe, otherwise they're being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed all the time, right? If you do well, you're pushed. If you don't do well, you're pushed you're criticized and pushed all the time too. So when you remove that absence, there's always between 3 to 6 months. I've seen when kids join our program, many times they just need a period to breathe, to do nothing, to be with themselves, to reconnect to themselves, to use their hands. They don't want to be pushed into something right away again. And then it naturally starts to come, because that voice is inside us, that curiosity is inside us, that sense of belonging, that love, that care, all of those things are within us. So then it starts to take a natural shape after they're able to, have some time to slow down and just catch their breaths, in a sense, right? And it happens also, not only students. We have a lot of people who take gap year. Gap year, in the middle of their job, they'll take a gap year. After university, they'll take a gap year, and they'll say, "We don't want to do anything for a year. We want to explore." But the first couple of months, they just take time, things. Then the explorations can start moving in different ways. It's a difficult thing, because see, the culture of schooling is not limited to the school. Once it's in our head, there's a massive unlearning process that has to happen, right? I decided on unschooling my daughter. She was unschooling, but that comparison competition virus was in my head. So I needed to unlearn that. I needed to see the pattern. I needed to see the harm it's causing. So it's not a matter of just getting out of the school space. It's actually being aware and unlearning some of the things, that fear, or that um, the competition, or the comparison, or the lack of self-worth. You have to reclaim those things. Then it starts to take shape in very beautiful ways. People start going out, they start exploring, they start opening themselves up to taking on more challenges. They start meeting different kinds of people outside their comfort zone. They start learning different skills. They're not afraid to make mistakes. So as a parent, one of the things I wanted to show my child is, we have this thing every year, let's try to learn something new together. And in that, I don't know much about it. So I'm also a beginner in that. And I make mistakes, and it's good for her to see how I make mistakes, how then I learn something about the mistake, then I get up and try again a different way. So that also shows her that mistakes are okay. We learn a lot from mistakes. We don't have to be afraid of making mistakes. In my own university, when Swaraj University, which we started, part of the um, graduation ritual is where people share. We celebrate mistakes. You have to list at least 10 mistakes you did during your learning journey. What are those mistakes? Those beautiful mistakes. Let's talk about them. Let's not try to hide them or cover them, because there's such rich learning that you can explore around that. So I think that's what, that celebration is needed to create that space that, again, people can come out of the fear.
Now, moving to reimagination, for a family navigating this architecture today, what is the immediate strategy to reclaim a child's agency without completely jeopardizing their survival in the current economy?
Yeah, I think, again, what I'm saying is you have to question the current economy, because the current economy tells us consume more, consume more, and you'll get happy. What I think is, as a parent, the first step is to actually think about how much how much do I need? What is my, a lot of times I meet parents who are working. I ask them, what's the number you have? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, have a number. What number will you have in the bank which you'll retire? Do you have a number for that or no? And they're like, no, we never thought about it. I'm like, you have to set a number, and then I reach that number, I'm done. I don't want to work for the system anymore. I don't want to do this. um, and also then, um, there's a lot of movements which we also are connected to and supporting around minimalism. I don't need to have so much. What's the minimum I need? In my spiritual tradition, Jainism, is very minimalistic, is talked about. And the beautiful thing is, with minimalism, you don't lose out, you're not sacrifice anything. There's the notion of less is more. If I have less things to worry about, I'll have more time, I'll have more happiness, I'll have more freedom to explore things. So I don't need to get in that trap of EMI all the time, taking more and more loan to be in the current economy. So I think part of when we talk about the deschooling idea is to see, how do we get out of the grips of the economy? How do we
Hmm.
create that space? The most there's a funny joke. What's the definition of a rich person? So somebody with money. What's the definition of a very, very rich person? Somebody with time. What's the definition of a very, 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 very rich person? Somebody who has time with children. This is the most important thing. We all say the most important thing in our life are our children, and yet we don't have time for them.
Hmm.
So, what kind of model is that? So, I think the first thing is to really look at your own needs. Why are you running? Are you just in a competition to show off? What's the basic things you need? Yes, you need to think about that. How much do you need to work really to get that? I mean, because, like, the people are just running and running without any set of limits. So, as I said, in my spiritual tradition, it's very interesting. There's a very active practice of setting limits. Like, okay, I'm only going to buy one shirt every year. That's it. I'll be happy with that. When I get it, I'm happy. I don't need anything else. You know, uh, for example, or I'm going to just I'm happy with just a very simple house or simple place. I don't need to keep going bigger and bigger. So I think this is the first thing in education which we need to build in to be able to challenge the system, because this thing of unending growth, more
Hmm.
and more and more, this is where the virus starts. And this is what that fear puts in, because I think I need more and more and more to get safety, to get respect, to have security, to deal with all my health problems. Everything, all of that is grounded in fear around it. So I think the first level is that really looking at, what kind of economy do I want to have? What are those basic things? The second thing is to know that economy is changing. What does the world need right now? So I made a whole list. I call it a livelihoods versus deadlyhood careers. So there's a
Hmm.
whole bunch of, most of what modern education teaches you are careers which are going to destroy the planet. Whether you're either financing it, or you're building the technology to destroy it and extract faster, or to drop bombs on people faster, or whether you're putting a legal system to protect those people who pollute or steal from the earth, or you put a psychological system or a medical system in place, which is, keeps people working even though their bodies are telling them this lifestyle is bad and making them sick. You keep working until you drop. So these are what the deadlyhoods are. What I'm talking about is a livelihoods. So I've identified more than 50 careers that are already
Hmm.
alive. People are doing them in the world. No university prepares you for these careers, but these are the careers that will are needed in the world today. If we want to regenerate ourselves, we want to regenerate our community life, we want to regenerate our ecosystems, our water systems, our forest systems, all of these things, our soil systems. Um, all of these careers are needed. Most young people are never told about these careers. Our sense of community life. So if you want to have a different economy, you have to have a different kind of community. You have to have people you can trust, you can share things with, who will help you. It's not only then about the bank account. Your security comes not from a bank account. Your security should come from the relationships you build. So I think that's what we want to invite people to start looking. And that for doing that, a different kind of education is needed for parents, to start looking
Well,
at it before they even talk about their children, their own life goals, fears. That, see, we all as parents were given fears from schooling.
well, in a few seconds, if an educator wants to stop acting as an agent of this hidden curriculum, what is the absolute first step they must take to dismantle this hidden mechanism in their own space?
Yeah, so I think uh, I can give you two steps. One is to encourage people, young people, to go out and explore and experience. Don't remain within the confines of school. Go out, explore, travel, meet people in your community. There's a whole bunch of there's so many talented, interesting people. We don't even know. Most of the time, kids don't ever talk to their neighbors. They don't know what their neighbors do. They don't know what skills or talents their neighbors have. They don't know who's in their community. So go and start meeting to people, talk with them, spend time with them who are nearby you. Everybody around you has some treasure or other. Doesn't matter their degree. Dismantle this idea that degrees matter. Degrees don't measure people's intelligence, people's love, how much care, how much generosity, how much kindness, how many practical skills. Those are the measure of intelligence, not how many degrees you have. So I would first dismantle the idea that degrees are the only thing that matter and that measure any kind of intelligence, and encourage young people to go out and explore and try to meet people. I often say go and look for the masters, people who have the deep knowledge and deep experience and deep wisdom. They're all around us. You have to go and look for them. If there's somebody like that in your school, one of the teachers, most of the teachers are mediocre fellows. They don't have anything deep, right? They're just repeating what's in the syllabus. But if you find one teacher who has that depth, then spend as much time as you can. If you don't have that kind of teacher, then go look out for them outside. Go and find the masters. That's the most important thing I think young people can do. And as a teacher, I would say, hey, go outside, go do this activity, go explore this thing. And luckily, I had a few such teachers in my life, which encouraged me to get outside of the classroom, outside of the exams, and try to really learn from life.
Well, when you strip away standardized metrics entirely, how does a sovereign learner maintain legitimacy in a world that still demands credentials? Do established institutions have any real incentive to recognize this kind of agency?
Yeah, so what we did in Swaraj, um, is that we identified more than 1,000 different organizations. I reached out, I met the CEOs, the leaders of those organizations. I said, we have a different kind of university without exams, without these standardized credentials, but with passionate people exploring the world. Can you give them a chance to work in your company or your organization, your NGO? And they will bring a portfolio and share with you their experiences. Just give them a 15-minute interview. Usually, those 15-minute interviews turned into 2-hour interviews because they were so fascinated by all the different things the learners were doing. They were fascinated by the portfolio. So I think that's one way, is that we have to, as part of this movement, the credentials actually are themselves falling flat on on its face. The most employers can't even rely on them, but they don't have anything better right now. What I would say is that we encourage learners to build portfolios, to be able to tell their stories better, and we use our privilege and our power to try to get access to different things. It's so interesting. Like even some of these institutions, like Google, or some of the big firms, they all have started removing the requirement for degrees or diplomas from their hiring process. You don't need to have that to apply there. So I think the point is to meet more organizations, to bring them in and saying, hey, do you want a piece of paper or do you want a passionate learner? Um, and that's the way that we can try to beat the system. We've already done it with Swaraj, and it's possible to do that. The toughest part of that, I'll tell you, is the middle management HR people. Those guys are really lazy, so they don't want. So you have to go to the CEO, and you have the CEO has to say, "Hey, we want to hire this person or give them an internship to get in." Once they're in, then it's up to them to prove themselves, right? We can't. Dictate to any. But if we the degree and the credential is like a key. So what has the left, progressive left up to now has said, oh, we'll hand out the key to a few more poor people, a few black people, a few brown people. You can have a key too. What I'm saying is we need to break down the door. No more handing out keys. We're breaking down the door. We're going to change the whole system. We're going to bring in people which have experience and passion and intrinsic motivation and high integrity, and are continuous lifelong learners. Those are the kinds of people companies should be hiring, organizations should be hiring, right? That's what we're the message we're giving to people is that's the way forward. And learners have to know how to get their portfolios together, how to document their experiences, their learnings from those experiences, how to tell their story, how to explain what they're doing and their learning journey and how they've been learning, and to develop their real world skills. But there's a growing and growing, I think AI is going to demolish the whole credential game. To be honest, AI is demolishing it because everything you learned in school, AI can do better. So now we need a whole bunch of other things, that creativity, that experience, that wisdom, that sense of real contextual knowledge. See, AI does those maps well. It can give you a list of different things, a map of things, but what does it mean in a neighborhood in Delhi? Or what does it mean in a village near Udaipur? AI can't tell you that answer. That's people who have real experience will only know. So the next revolution is going to be actually around people who have real skills and experience and wisdom, and can work well with others. So I think AI is not going to do that, but it will really put this whole system under a test.
If education shapes not only what we learn, but what we feel safe to express, the question is no longer just about knowledge. It is what kind of human being we are trained to become.
Yeah.
Manish Jain, thank you very much for the negotiation.
Thank you, Phil. I hope we can keep this dialogue going. Thank you for raising these very important questions for society and for the planetary well-being. Thank you so much.